Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Slice of the Reef, our new podcast that demystifies the art of saltwater fish keeping. My name is Billy.
And I'm Giancarlo, aka Banana or Fishy Fish. We're going to be your guides today into the amazing world beneath the waves, but also in the box in your living room. Crazy, huh?
Enjoy and easy reefing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Slice of the Reef. My name is Billy.
I'm Inept or Chris.
Jesus Christ.
It says Banana, Billy, and Chris. Don't you think Banana we should introduce in the order?
Yeah, but he made me
Oh,
introduce.
yeah.
So,
And then
But it's any of us like, I'm Banana.
and I'm Chris.
I'm Chris.
I'm
Oh,
Billy.
damn it. And this week we are talking about frag, glue, and grow, coral propagation 101.
Yeah, tips and stuff about how to glue, frag, and grow propagation.
Mm-hmm. If you're listening to this, if you made it this far, you probably already tried to do your first frag session at least, and it was probably a mess. So we're going to talk to you about how to clean it up, how to get everything firmly attached and safe, and get you starting your coral farm post-haste.
Yeah, or if you haven't even tried it, this is a good thing to listen to before you delve into the art of fragging, because it can be a bit of an art, but it's also a bit of a mess, like Billy said. And more often than not, you'll get a fair amount of broken, sad-looking frags before you get a bunch of happy, successful.
Leonardo DiCaprio once said, "You cannot have art without mess." And that's true of fragging as well. Something to think about.
I feel like just learning to apply the right amount of pressure per the kind of coral that you have also takes a little bit of learning, but super glue is notoriously a very clean and easy to work with substance. So
This is true. This is true. Too much pressure and your coral will grow out to be introverted.
Oh no, you don't want that. Okay, so I think we're starting this week with our myth of the week.
Yeah, kicking right into it. Normally you do it a little bit later, but Billy wants to start it off now, so I guess we'll do it now. And the myth for this week is that you need perfect water parameters before you even think about propagating.
Talk a little bit more about that, Banana.
Well, the myth is that you need perfect parameters before you try propagating.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I mean, when more P's potentially.
Yeah, we can put more P's in there.
Perfect parameters.
Yeah, better than the S's from last week's episode.
Oh yeah, I love that.
So I mean, mostly you just frag based off of a couple of other attempts other than just water parameters, right? Like, just the size of the coral, what it's doing. If the coral is happy, you can frag it.
I want to throw it out there, but most people's first frags are accidental.
Mm-hmm.
They accidentally break something off, or they'll glue a coral in the wrong place, and when they try to move it, snap, a branch comes off. They'll bump into a Monty comes off. For the ones of us that can keep successfully bird's nest, because some people can't.
Not me. I've killed like 18 of them.
Like you'll bump into it or you'll look at it too hard and boom, you've got bird's nest frags all over your tank.
And that can honestly be a really good indicator of when your tank is ready for frags without you even really having to test for anything or like wait for a specific arbitrary parameter to be perfect without having to worry about your microbiome. A lot of your frags will be accidental, and if they start surviving, that's when you know you're probably ready to start a little farm.
I mean, one of the main reasons I typically frag is I'm running out of space, right? and that sort of stopped happening when I got a really big aquarium. But if you don't have space to work, then you start breaking a lot more stuff accidentally for sure.
You still have that issue?
Not right now. Not right now, I don't. Not since I got the 800, really. It has a lot more space. But definitely things growing close enough to the glass, you're running the magnet, you run into something that's, too close to the glass, it breaks off.
Montipora digitata is a really good example. Monty Digi and Bird's Nest are two really easily fraggable corals just by existing in your tank.
Yeah.
Every time you do maintenance, it will accidentally make a frag.
And honestly, that's how people end up with like their very first frags that they sell, right? Something breaks off and they'll glue it on a plug or something else. And then whenever it's ready, they'll sell it off and they'll be like, hey, how can I pay it forward or give it off or whatever? But yeah, I mean, ideally, you want decent water parameters, but whatever parameters you have for the original coral to grow happily will be enough for the frag to grow as well, I think. I think that's just my, like, if you have bird's nests, whatever parameters or whatever, like, your tank is that your bird's nest is constantly growing happily, will be fine for once you frag the coral.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the main issue you're trying to work around is the wound in the flesh that you cause when you frag that coral. So there is hopefully a clean cut, like usually in a ring around where you're fragging that little bit. And that bit can be susceptible to infection. It can be, lodged into sand and deprived of light. It can have differing flow because, you're gluing it, you're covering it in glue. There's a few risk factors when you're exposing that newly broken piece of coral to your tank. But most of the actual parameters you can test for are not going to be the root cause of any issues. It's going to be infections in the wound and stuff like that.
Too much flow. Yeah, once you have the wound going and then you have too much flow and it starts irritating the wound.
Oh yeah, the wounded flesh can kind of peel off just because it's not used to getting literal flow underneath, like between the flesh and the skeleton. That can be an issue.
Yeah. But then I've noticed that sometimes, like when it starts peeling off, when you have a situation where your flesh is peeling off, especially with SPS, it can get a lot worse and it can end up causing things like RTN coral that, some coral will be more delicate to frag than others, clearly. But some stuff will just be fine with whatever you're using at the right time.
Yeah. So the only real way you can know if you're ready to frag is to frag and do it and see how it goes, or to accidentally frag and kind of monitor those little bits. You can even pick them up off the sand bed and glue them just to get a feel for how annoying super glue is going to be in your life moving forward.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. But most of the things you can test for, I mean, they're going to be good no matter what because your coral will be alive. And as long as coral is alive in your tank, you're going to have a pretty good success rate, in my experience.
Yeah, I will say this though: don't rush. Like a lot of people want to make a copy or want to make it available to someone. Well, we'll make frags before they or the coral are ready. So while you don't want to wait for the perfect parameters, you're chasing pH, whatever. If the corals are growing, then that's fine and good. But you don't want to rush the coral if it's not ready. I've always regretted that. If I ever go like, well, I just want to make this up by Thursday because they're coming. Like I've always regretted that.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I don't like touching coral that's new. At least until it's like a nice-ish colony.
There's a lot of chemistry and a lot of adjustment that's happening to a coral when it's moved to a new location and a new tank and new water. And we don't really understand those yet to the extent where we can just kind of reduce it to a number. So what we do instead is we say, okay, wait 2 to 3 weeks after you get a coral before you start fragging it.
I would even say more than that. Like I would wait at least a few months before you start fragging the sow or fragging to pay forward or whatever.
True.
You don't want to have your coral not growing, because it hasn't properly acclimated, and you cut it, and like your coral that hasn't properly acclimated is stressed or has an open area of infection, which will now be, moving backwards and affecting the coral, right? It's constantly a battle of how hardy the coral is and how accustomed it is to your tank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then moving forward, right? Like, what are some reasons that you guys frag corals? Like we've said a few already, right? But what are some reasons that you guys have for cutting or fragging coral?
I mean, there's only a few reasons why. Like, you either want to move the colony to multiple places in the tank. So many people run out of room that's not super common. But if you're doing something like moving zoanthids around to try to stop acropora from branching in certain directions, you can try to move a colony of something fast growing to sort of create a fence between two sort of slower growing colonies that might start a war. You can, obviously, if you want to sell, if you want to create a copy for someone to hold on to you to, and I always recommend this, once you get a decent sized colony going, you always want a copy for someone.
Especially if you're emotionally attached to it. It could turn for the worse in like, of course, a matter of 2 or 3 hours. And if you have emotional investment in that coral, once it's established, just give a piece of it to a friend.
Yeah.
I did that with my Manila Spy. Manila Spy, I can't talk. It's like an orange thin branching manji. It grows like a weed, but that can also kind of work toward its detriment because it can shade itself and it can build up a bunch of pests and gross stuff in the older skeleton. So it can RTN like just overnight. But I have a bunch of friends that have little bits because it's so easy to frag. So I've restarted that colony like 3 or 4 times.
That's one thing you do want to make sure you do, though, when you give them a colony. You make sure that they feel comfortable telling you if it did or didn't survive in their tank. Because sometimes people will be embarrassed and you'll be like, oh, I thought I had a backup. And then you don't have the security you thought you had, right?
That happened to me when I transferred tanks. I had an icy kaleidoscope, which is a very nice aggro. Not a bougie aggro, but I think it's a nice aggro.
Yeah.
And I gave it around to like 4 or 5 different people.
Achilles, did you say?
Huh?
What was the aggro?
Icy kaleidoscope.
Oh.
Yeah, kaleidoscope. I think it was like a very nice green with purple tips, purple coral lights. But when I went around, I was like, "Hey, you got one. You got like a frag of this. I'll buy it back from you, whatever." No one had a coral afterwards. No one. Through one way or another, like their tanks had crashed, or they went through nutrient issues, or it just wasn't meant to be. But no one had the coral to give it back, or to pay forward, or pay it back to me, which honestly kind of sucked. I mean, I liked it. I was very fond of it. I wish I still kind of had it. If of all the coral that I've lost or gained in the hobby, I think that's like one of the ones that I wish I got the most. But it happens, right?
Another good example of that is the weeping willow, the Reef Builder's weeping willow. Everyone wants to have a weeping willow because Jake kind of made it famous, but he'd never ever fragged it that we know of. And one day it just died or something happened to it. We don't really know. And it's no longer in the hobby. So what we're trying to do now is find kind of replacements for that weeping willow that meet the same requirements that he set for it. But that particular strain, as far as we know, is no longer with us.
Yeah, there's a few corals like that. Like my personal white whale for Acropora is the Vivid's Nerd Rope Acropora that they used to have. And it was this bluish Acropora, and it would grow green, and then as the branch or nodule grew a little bit more, it would go purple. And so it was all kinds of different, like the base flesh, once it sort of got a little bit further along, would be blue. So it had all these blues and purples and yellows in it. And there were a few people that bought it, myself included, but it would always come in the mail just dead. Like it never really propagated or traveled well. And so you never really know if you have something that's tricky to get back. So it's always good to have a copy for somebody's tank.
Even if you've been fragging, right? Like maybe we hear something in this episode, you're like, damn, I never thought of that. Right?
To that point, this episode's going to be more about the craft of fragging, the
art,
the practicum, the art of fragging, different approaches. We might do selling in a future episode. Ooh, yeah, the emotional facet of it. Ooh, when you frag something and it dies.
Yeah, that's the worst
feeling.
Yeah.
I don't think
we remember. Do you guys remember your first time fragging? Like the first core you guys ever intentionally fragged or not?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think my first frag was like a mushroom that had grown onto a rock, and I just like yoinked it off, and I was like, oh my gosh, I did a frag.
For a really long time when I was starting out, because I started out pretty young, it was mostly soft corals because they were a lot easier to keep. And it was really worthwhile to try to trade other hobbyists if you could get a trade going, because it was really difficult. You'd get one distributor and all they'd ever get was leathers, right? So my first intentional frag was a leather, and then I didn't change my carbon, and everything was sick for a week.
Oh my god!
So,
yeah, fun fact about leathers and most other soft corals: they emit some sort of chemical warfare when they get pissed, and there's nothing that pisses them off more than getting chopped into little pieces.
Yeah. Oh, actually, there's another reason why people frag corals: for trading, right? To expand your collection.
Ooh, yeah.
To you trade a coral, you give a coral, which again, I mean, falls under the category of cutting it to give it to somebody else, right? But Anyways, back to it. Yeah, I don't remember my first time
There's a
fragging.
whole like community in the Bay Area called Bay Area Reefers, and they have like a post economic trading system set up where they just give each other frags of stuff. They'll barter, they'll trade, they'll do IOUs, and it's really cool. I wish I lived up there. Give us a
I
shout out in the
always,
comments if you're in the Bay Area and you're part of Bar.
And you're on a podcast site where you can comment.
Yeah.
I always recommend getting into a club if you can. And a good mark of a good club is the availability of frags to participating members. A lot of times if you're not known, they won't really want to do too much business with you until you've established sort of some reputation inside the club, because a lot of people will try to, I guess scam is the word for it.
Yeah.
But getting into a club and getting into a good social circle that does reef locally can be a great way to sell, trade, and get rid of your frags for sure.
Yeah. I mean, just in general, being a part of a reefing club is a huge like night and day difference when it comes to the reefing experience, especially for beginners, right? Just having someone that you can connect with and know that you can, again, not just trade with, but someone that you can have a personal connection with, like an in-person connection with, and as far as our hobby goes, because we're also scattered and all over. It really, really makes a difference in terms of how your experience in the hobby will go.
Very true. All right. So if you're deciding to start fragging, what kind of tools and equipment and safety precautions do you have to keep in mind?
I'm going to say this very close to my microphone so that you can hear it. Gloves.
What was that?
Gloves.
Always
One
gloves.
more time for the mic. Come on.
Gloves.
Perfect.
Gloves. Gloves are huge, man. Like people don't think about it until very, very late. Like whenever you touch your coral, you're gonna want to wear gloves. Always. So just any contact that you have with your coral, you're gonna want gloves on.
Every facet of fragging, though, you don't want that super glue on your hands, because once you've had it on your hands one time, you're just gonna go buy gloves, so you don't have to feel it ever again. That cyanoacrylate glue is basically engineered as a means to glue together flesh if you're wounded. It's like
it really is
liquid Band-Aid. It's just doing its job.
Yep. So definitely gloves are number one. You need something to actually cut or manipulate the coral, unless you're doing something like a Monty or bird's nest where it'll just fall apart if you touch it. So you'll need either cutters, or some people will say if you're doing like a big fleshy coral, maybe a scalpel. If you're doing like a leather or a zoanthid, if you're doing something very hard, like, I don't know, an Acropora, Gonopora, sort of the boulder growing guys, you may need a bandsaw. Some things are hard to frag without a bandsaw. A lot of people will say bone snips. I've not had a lot of good luck with bone snips on anything except for branching Acropora, really.
bone cutters. Yeah, bone cutters. I think the mistake a lot of people make in the very beginning is they will try fragging hammers, and they will try fragging torches and trumpets and all kinds of euphyllia with bone cutters. And basically what it does is it'll pin the skeleton. And if you don't know, the skeleton of most euphyllia is very, very porous. So what I end up, and it runs, like if you were to draw a line the way that the cells are aligned in macros, is upwards. They build upwards. So what ends up happening is you'll end up cutting the first cut, and your entire your torch or whatever you're trying to cut will split longwise, like to the mouth of the coral. Yeah,
if you've ever had a polyp bail out, you'll see that the inside structure of the polyp is how the inside structure of the coral is. It is a series of sort of parallel plates that are sort of loosely bound together by a porous structure. So if you try to cut a euphyllia with a bone cutter, you're in for a bad time. You just are.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's always going to go badly. It's not always going to go badly. Like there's always going to be, again, every single reefing aspect, there's someone that's like, oh, I do it like this, and I've never had a bad experience, right? More often than not, you will have a very bad time, and you will end up, especially if it's your first time cutting or fragging something, you will end up very unhappy if you try fragging Euphilia with bone cutters.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that you notice more with Euphilia and bone cutter methods than anything else is that if you have high phosphates, it will create a slightly more fragile coral skeleton. So a lot of times with people who are new to fragging, new to corals, all that, they will have less success with the bone cutters. And then then the people who have been in the hobby longer, or they have more stuff, they have their phosphates better under control. They'll be like, I don't know what your problem is, just use bone cutters. And so it's about uncontrolled variables sometimes. Some people will have success doing methods, and then they'll purport them to be the easiest or best way, but they may not be the best way for you, right? But having said all that, I don't recommend, if you're new, using bone cutters to frag Euphilia.
Yeah, we're going to go into specific like coral and fragging tips and put individual corals later. But just in general, I mean, bone cutters are great to have. For Euphilia, I would even recommend, I'm not even saying go all the way to the other end with like a $500 bandsaw. Those like $9 or $11 little hand saws that you'll find at Home Depot, like the little DeWalt ones, you're better off using that than you are using bone cutters. And that's for the longest time, because I haven't had a bandsaw forever. I just got mine like 2 years ago. And for the longest time, what I would use to frag Euphilia was those little long, narrow, hand saws that I would just angle back and forth in the angle that I wanted. Kind of like a bandsaw.
Called bandsaws, yeah. Well, no, the hand. What are they? Hacksaws?
Yeah, hacksaws, yeah. Little handheld hacksaw. Yeah. They're super small. And honestly,
some people are using Dremel now.
Yeah, people use Dremels because now Dremels are more affordable. You can get one for like $30-$40, right? And again,
an important note for Dremels though is you'd really need glasses.
Oh yeah. I think honestly, once you start fragging coral, it's just better to wear glasses than not. True. Safety goggles are really, really good to have. I mean, not everyone uses them, but even when you're cutting, especially when you're cutting some things like zoas, when you're cutting SPS outside of the water, because bone cutters, the way they work is they just apply a crap load of pressure to make the bone shoot outwards. It could happen where the bone just shoots to your eye,
So
you have bones in your eye.
There's definitely sort of the splatter. You always want, we definitely say gloves, and that's also to protect you because of when you're annoying these corals, and you will be if you're fragging them. They'll produce slime, they'll produce their toxins, they'll do whatever it takes to make that stop. They have their defense mechanisms to protect themselves, and those defense mechanisms will be firing. A lot of people will say, oh, it doesn't bother me, or I don't mind, or they'll try to tough guy it up. And that's all well and good until, a zoanthid shoots toxins into your eye, and then you have vision damage, or you have a bone fragment go flying and it lodges itself in mostly your eyes, right? That's why we talk about glasses. They're $1. They're not that hard to get. Gloves and glasses, I highly recommend them. Some people go so far.
$1. Oh, go ahead.
Some people go so far as to say face coverings or respirators. And I will say, if you're working on a very large colony of zoanthids, in a lot of cases, I've had people feel sick the next day, like they'll run a fever or something like that. So, I mean, do know the coral you're working on, and make your best judgment as to whether you want to protect yourself from like mist and spray.
Yeah, I mean, my experience. There.
Nope. Yeah, but safety equipment. Super important.
Yeah. My experience with the glasses thing, especially, I was always like I don't need it, I'll be fine kind of thing. Like I naturally wear glasses and naturally kind of blindish. Not super blind, just kind of blindish. I was fragging these zoas one time, and glasses, because not safety glasses, just regular vision glasses, which again, I wasn't wearing for the sake of safety. I was wearing for the sake of I can't see if I don't wear them. But I was bone cutting these zoas off of a rock, and they were like the thick, super toxic common green bellies, right? And I, like, the bone cutters that I was using slipped and squeezed a zoa, and the zoa juice squirted right into my, like, where my eye would be, like right into the center of my glasses, where like when I put my bone cutters down and I looked forward, and I saw like the straight splatter of Zoa in my glasses where the Zoa was trying to get me. And for me, like after that moment forward, I was like, yeah, Zoas, especially glasses, always.
Yeah. Safety glasses, $1 ER trip due to polytoxin exposure, up to $100,000. You do the math, kid.
Loss of vision from palytoxin poisoning?
Priceless.
Priceless, yeah. A little priceless. Yeah, I mean, no, it's a life-altering thing. Like, it's not the kind of thing where you'll be like, oh, you can't see for a few days and then come back. Like, sure, that might happen. But considering that polytoxin is one of the most like dangerous toxins, and again, that's us excluding the fact that there's all sorts of bacteria when you mess with your tank. And you could have even water. Like, you could be taking a clam out of your tank, or you could be fragging something with a bandsaw. And bacteria-coated water goes straight in your eye, right? And it's just safety altogether.
Yeah, no, I mean, and just when you have a rock out and you're manipulating it, often there'll be other critters that are not the coral. Like you'll get bristleworms, I had one of my friends cut their hand very deeply on a sharp bit of the rock after they had worked with the coral. Like they'd cut it with a bandsaw, they'd cut the frags off, but they'd made a very sharp edge with their bandsaw, and they got a pretty good gash on their hands, and they ended up going to the ER for that as well, right? So like it's worth being careful. It's worth taking the extra couple of seconds, or paying attention to what you're doing or not doing it. Obviously tired, because some of these animals are very toxic, and that's why they're colorful, to warn you, hey, don't eat me, I'm toxic. And as much as everybody has like a line, they're going to be like, well, this is the risk I will accept or the risk that I won't. Getting this into your bloodstream, like shoving it into your hand with a pair of bone snips, like there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So do definitely take your safety seriously, and sort of go
yeah,
slow.
the sake of what we're saying right now isn't for the sake of scaring you guys into
No,
not
for sure.
cutting, not fragging, right? Like it's kind of like when you're buying a miter saw, right? A miter saw is a kind of saw where you raise it up at an angle and then the saw goes down on wood and it cuts it, right? Obviously, like just because it's a scary thing to think about or look at, you're never not going to use it. But you need to respect that there is a certain danger that comes with using a miter saw or any power tool or any kind of equipment. You just kind of want to be careful about it. Respect it. Respect the coral. Respect not the fact that it's going to kill you, but respect the dangers that it has and respect the nature of it before you move on to actually cutting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely don't not frag your corals, because then you'll have unrestricted coral warfare, and one of your corals is going to win, and then you'll just have one coral, and it'll be boring and sad, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some stuff's easier, right? Like, and now we can start talking about different kinds of coral and different how to frag them. I think by far one of the easiest kinds of coral to cut are softies. And that's zinnia, leathers, kind of zoas, but not really zoas, gorgonians.
The big
These
old
things,
cabbage leathers. Yeah.
cabbages,
I think those are
toadstools,
stony.
double sand.
Aren't cabbages stony?
They're not stony. They can be a little fibrous, but they're still like leathery enough for like a pair of scissors.
They have those the little bony spurs in them, like
the little
what are they called? What are those called? CD? No, I don't remember what it is. They're pseudo stony corals, but they're really soft corals. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but they're also soft enough for like a cane tree, for example, has it too, even though a lot of people don't really notice it. But they're soft enough for like a general pair of scissors will be able to snip it and boom, you have your frags. If you ever want to, if not like a small surgical knife or a small blade, and you just
or scissors,
or scissors, preferably scissors.
Yeah, whatever you do, you want to make sure that it's sharp. And the other thing with soft corals is they're most often more toxic. They don't have skeletons to defend themselves, so once you have irritated or cut them, they will typically produce or exude their toxin. So it really pays with soft corals specifically to run carbon for a couple of days. I know some people don't like that for, bothering their tangs or this or that, but specifically for soft corals, or generally after fragging, I do recommend running carbon for a day or two.
And I don't mean like we don't mean people toxic. Like you're not gonna die cutting a toadstool unless you really, really, really fuck it up.
Unless you drink the tank water, but that might probably cause other issues.
Don't eat the toadstool.
Do not eat toadstools.
Don't eat coral. But yeah, like they are softies are generally more, like Annette said or Chris said, like, they are generally more toxic towards the other inhabitants of your tank. Because to them, this is like, hey, you're being attacked in the wild. It's like, yo, if a coral is bitten by a fish that's predatory, it'll naturally try to release toxins to deter such fish or deter other fish, or even warn other leathers in the area to also produce toxins so that they en masse can deter fish.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing is that this is a confined system, right? So in the wild, they're going to produce a lot of that, scent, that deterrent, that bad taste. But in your aquarium, it's going to be relatively highly concentrated, right? So it's just better to run carbon because, I mean, you'd be mad if your house was really stinky.
Mm-hmm.
Another trick for fragging soft corals is to put a bunch of iodine in the tip water. This is kind of going to be a jack of all trades trick for other like types of coral as well. But soft corals, in my experience, have a really high tolerance of iodine, and that iodine will sterilize the hell out of most bacteria or other ickies that are going to try to jump into that coral when it's still healing.
Yeah, definitely. After you do the cuts, there's the whole aftercare and presentations and stuff for sure. And iodine is great.
That's true.
Yeah, and speaking of sterile, take care of your equipment. Take care of the scissors. Take care of the bone cutters that you're going to use. You don't want to be using tetanus-inducing bone cutters because, again, this is salt water, and these are usually metal tools. They will rust. If you get a pair of regular Walmart scissors and you never take care of them, and you just use them in the salt water, put them on the side, use them in salt water, put them on the side, use them in salt water, put them on the side, I can almost guarantee you after a week or two, you will have tetanus kind of rust. You're going to have rusty scissors. And
they won't open because scissors are famously two pieces. And if there's rust, then they fuse together and you cannot use them as scissors anymore. They are now just a really bad knife.
And then the fact that as you cut, right, if you're cutting coral with really rusty equipment, you're putting the coral at risk of, not being very happy with the way it's being cut. If you put you wouldn't stick a super rusty like metal piece of whatever in your tank, right? Because obviously it's bad for coral. So why would you use it to cut the coral, right? You're actively creating a wound on said coral, and now its first point of contact is going to be with super rusty bone cutters.
Which is, by the way, oxidized iron.
Yeah.
Famously not great for corals.
Not great for coral. So, I mean, all it takes when you're done using it, rinse it off in RODI, or you rinse it off in deionized water and dry it off, and you're good. That's good. It's that 30 seconds to a minute and a half of extra care that will make your tank and your equipment last so much longer.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just even something so slight as rinsing off and drying, you'll get even bone snips, which are just glorified scissors. You'll get years more out of them.
Their scissors with more leverage for crushing.
And it's just better for the coral too. Like I went to a guy's house to buy some acros, right? He was going to frag them for me on the spot. And normally it's not an issue. Well, normally I would like them free frag, but he was going to frag them on the spot. And I was paying for them. And he pulls out these brown bone cutters everywhere, but like the bottom of the handle was like bumpy, rusty brown. And he went to make the first frag, and I was like, you know what? Maybe my tank's not quite ready for that kind of acro. Let me come back up another day.
Before you inject 5 grams of iron oxide into your tank.
And then again, into the fresh cut frags that he's going to give him. It's like, it's not worth the risk. I'd rather have no frags than dying frags. No.
For sure. But I mean, that was a big diversion from fragging of coral types. I guess we should talk about the different coral types. We did softs, which is largely you need a cutting implement, which scissors, blade, run carbon. Yeah. And then I guess go to LPS, utility type stuff, right?
Well, I mean, there's some more. Like when it comes to mushrooms, what I like to do with mushrooms is I love using dead Monty skeletons. That's what I do now. I use dead Montes as plates for my mushrooms. And as my mushrooms grow out and put babies on the sides, I'll just break off the pieces of dead Monte.
Yeah.
Then I'll put some more dead Monte underneath so that it keeps on growing into that. Another big tool for softies when you're propagating is not like thinking that after you cut it, you're going to need something to attach it to, right? And usually what we like to do is rubble, because you can't glue. Anyone that's fragged will tell you this, because everyone starts with the same things. You cannot glue soft coral. You can't glue soft coral tissue. It's going to recede and float away, and Zinnia, leathers, it's going to do what it wants to do, regardless of what you want it to do. Very common practice is taking a little bit of twine or rubber band and tying the coral to a piece of rubble. This helps more with leathers and with other things, because you can't do this with mushrooms. You're just going to, kill the mushroom. Zinnia will just burn through, but leathers, you can kind of rubber band or tie them to rubble and let them attach onto that. What I like to do with zinnia when I frag it is I have a little basket at the bottom full of gravel, like freshwater gravel, and I'll let it float and attach to the gravel. And once it's got its foot firmly on some gravel, I will then glue that gravel onto rock or onto the frag plug, where we'll then, cover the
Wait,
gravel.
are you saying rubble or rebel?
Rubble.
I'm talking about gravel.
Oh, I thought you were saying rabble.
gravel, like a Korean gravel.
Yeah, a little gravel rubble.
Little round rocks. Yeah, little round freshwater rocks.
Yeah.
I'll stick it in the rock. It'll attach to the gravel. I'll take that gravel and I will glue that gravel to the frag plug or whatever I want it to. Especially because I like to ship. It's easier to do that than to ship like the Zoa or but to ship Zinnia with a piece of rubble that would then be bouncing all over the bag and then smashing the Zinnia and whatever, releasing more toxins. That's my secret for that. And then again, mushrooms. When it comes to mushrooms, I like to do the Monty.
So you just need other methods of affixing it to the plug or rock that you're trying to get it to attach to, or you just need to put it near or like on top of that medium and just put it in a low flow area. Give it some time.
Just pray for the best.
But you want to be careful about with rubber bands and twine specifically is they can exert enough force on the coral to kind of like split it in half, either during or after its attachment to that rock. So sometimes you might end up with, like a toadstool that is weirdly cut in half. It's because your rubber band was a little bit too taut.
Yeah. Some people will even cut or frag soft corals by putting a rubber band on it and tightening it down too tight. That can happen.
That's a really good idea.
Kind of a
so
bondage.
Mushrooms, that's the more common, where you'll get a thin rubber band, not a thick one. And then you'll tighten down the rubber band, and then the mushroom will divide because the rubber band is irritating it. And then you can take a bandsaw or chisel or bone cutters to whatever it's on. If you're using Banana's Montipora skeleton method, you just sort of break it off.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just break it off.
That's a really good method because that Monty skeleton is famously easy to break.
Super thin.
I do the same thing with Zoas, where I will grow Zoas on Monty plate, and then I will take a razor blade, and I will cut the Zoa's foot, so not through the actually the polyps or whatever, but I'll cut through the mantle, and then I'll dip them and just break the Monty piece off.
Is that the technical term for the weird like interstitial tissue between the Zoa polyps? Is that called the mantle?
The mantle.
Or is that just like your placeholder word?
It's changed a few times since I learned it. It used to be the mantle, but I don't think I've looked it up since 2006.
So I don't even think people have a word for it. So that was probably the last word that was assigned to it. So we'll call it the mantle. But when we say mantle, we're talking about like Zoas are independent polyps, but they still share like the
foot.
Their foot's like kind of attached by a weird pseudo foot, so they can share nutrients and tell each other when to close, stuff like that.
It's called a coenosarc.
Called a what?
Coenosarc? Coenosarc. I don't know. Tell me.
Nice. Thanks, science, for making a really.
You pronounce C.
Oh yeah, Cenosarc.
Cenosarc, maybe.
Cenosarc. Where is it?
C. I'll link it.
I'm gonna have to Google. I'm gonna have to Google further.
Oh, this is for stony corals, I think. Oh no, Zoas. No.
Yeah, I think it's a
Anyway,
Ceno.
the
I think it's
mantle.
Ceno. Yeah, Cenosurf. I'm
Venusaur.
pretty,
All right, there we go.
pretty sure the COE. I'm pretty sure. I'm like 90% sure.
No, you're right. No, you are. It says right here.
It is right.
Venusaur.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Ceno.
Not Quenisark.
that's for stony corals, though, right?
I'm wrong. Senosark is correct. Real reefers can admit when they're wrong.
Yeah.
No, because I remember like an old biology class I took. Like my professor would drill it into our head, and he would loudly call out anyone that pronounced COE as co instead of C.
Or they'll call it a Zo instead of a Zoa.
And
No,
now you
COE.
know.
Yeah, like COE.
Oh, they're also called stolons, I think. Stolonal network. That's the more like plant herbology.
Well, those are not plants. Those are animals. They're straight animals. Like I think they're one of the simplest forms of like animal.
They're basically Nidarians. Are very simple, right?
Yeah, very simple. There's just an
like
intestinal sac and like a very.
Anyway, so when you're fragging Zoas, you want to use a razor blade to cut the stolonal network or the Cenosarc or the mantle or the weird pseudo-connected foot, the rhizome that's in between the individual Zoa polyps. And when you get a Zoa colony to close up, you can really see the difference between the individual polyps and the mantle / Cenosarc.
Yeah. Downside is though, whenever you get a Zoa colony to close up, you don't know what Zoa you're cutting.
And it's called a Zoa, not a Zoa, not a Zo. Just
a Zoa.
You said Zo.
A Zoa.
I heard you say Zo.
Well, there's other kinds of corals we can frag besides the soft corals.
Oh, are there? Tell me more.
Yeah. So
there's the LPS corals, right?
LPS coral are a little more difficult. Mainly because whenever you hear LPS, your first thought is going to be hammers, torches, Euphyllia, right? But then you also realize that LPS includes gonies, it includes acans, it includes trumpets, which again is kind of like Euphyllia-ish, favites, chalices, all those kinds of, coral fall under the LPS category again, because LPS is a hobby-defined term. It's not like a fixed definition, right? But we consider all of those LPS.
Mm-hmm.
And for some of them, right, like hammers, torches, and other Euphyllia, like we talked about earlier, you can use a little hacksaw or a little handsaw to kind of cut it off if you don't want to get a Dremel. But for a lot of the other ones, like chalices, you can kind of break off. As if it was a Monty, you're just going to have a lot more difficulty getting the eyes out. But when it comes to Favia, or the thicker ones like Gonies, like, acants, Micromusa, you're gonna need something that cuts, like a bandsaw or like like a bandsaw or a Dremel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for some LPS, it's going to be easier than others. I don't particularly care for cutting, for example, gonoporas, because they tend to grow in big boulders. If you keep them smaller, like if you cut the small colonies, it's not quite as annoying. But if you have a really big goni colony going, they're really annoying to frag.
Gonies are so annoying to frag. What I do when I frag gonies, because again, they grow like a dome. Imagine like a semicircle. They're like a half sphere, right? A dome.
And every time they add a new correlate, it grows in between the other facets of the dome. So just imagine like an infinitely spreading dome.
So what I like to do with them is I'll slice off like the bottom centimeter of the whole thing. Okay, just to bring the whole thing down the size, right? I'll slice off the bottom, not even centimeter, like the bottom ½ inch of the whole thing. And then I will peak slice the entire slice that I just cut off. And then I'll cut off all the inner skeleton. And from that, say I have like a 4-inch diameter goni that I'm cutting skeleton, I'll make anywhere from like 20 to 30 frags from that one thing, which is why I don't like fragging gonies, because I don't have the space, nor do I want to be dealing with 20 frags of every kind of freaking goni at frag, right? It's awful. And it's really tedious because then you're gluing little gonies on the plugs for like a ½ hour straight. And they get slippery and they're sliming all over. And it's like, and that's what the bandsaw, right? Which is supposedly the easier way to do it. It's just such a pain in the ass to deal with.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that coral is considered in the same category of LPS as Euphilia, which at a certain point there are two distinct polyps that are separated by like an inch or two of their old bone skeleton. And for those, you just take a Dremel like Banana's head and you just cut the bone without
a little bit
crushing
closer to the kind of porous side, but not necessarily as much or difficult. You've sort of then got the micromucil, right? You got the acans, you've got the sort of large polyp colonial items where gonies or those will have smaller polyps, but they're still considered LPS. Like I said, it's kind of not really a technical term. It's kind of hobby defined.
Yeah.
But with the micros, kind of the same thing, but they grow a little more flat typically.
Those
but
are
you
a lot
want to
easier to frag, yeah.
because you got to be careful where you basically do need a bandsaw, or you need to be really industrious with a handsaw to get those apart. But you got to be careful where you cut because you don't want to bifurcate a lot of the heads, right?
Yeah, because when I cut the gani, like I don't care if I cut a head in half or like a gani polyp in half, it'll grow back eventually. Especially because each frag has like 15 of the tiny little polyps. And if you've ever seen a closed-up gani, the polyps are tiny. When it comes to micros or acans, the heads are a lot bigger. And so it's a lot more of a process to like, you don't want to sell someone that's just like, I mean, some vendors do. And it's personally annoying when they do it. But, like they'll just sell you like a square, and that square is like 4 half acans.
Adds
like
up to 2 polyps.
Of an acan. Yeah, it's like, and then they'll have the audacity to be like, well, it's 4 heads, we're going to charge you the price per head 4 times. No, dude.
That
like
makes me
the
mad.
sum of 1 head. I mean, I guess it is in the long term easier because then each one of those will grow in the longer heads, but that's a different point. Anyways, when it comes to fragging acans, like Inep said, or like Chris said, you're going to want to bandsaw them because it's such a tedious process of like guiding a saw in between the head and the eyes. The eyes, the head. What do you call them? The mouse? What do you call it?
The polyps.
Yeah, the polyps.
Yeah,
polyps.
I'd go with the polyp. Yeah. No, definitely bandsaw for these is recommended. You can do it with a handsaw. You can do it with the other hacksaw methods. You can do it with a Dremel. But bandsaw for micromucil makes things a lot easier for sure.
100%.
For trumpet corals, there's actually 2 different types of trumpet coral, right? And one of them is a lot more interconnected, like the polyps, because the flesh like stretches all the way down.
Yeah.
Have you guys fragged other type of those?
I have one that's like that. I had a giant candy cane coral, or I have a giant candy cane. And the problem is that like the coral doesn't grow thick and branch like the other ones do. And so what'll end up happening is you just have to be very industrious with how you're going to cut the polyps out or the heads out, especially because it grows from like, I call it the radial growth, right? From the center outwards. And as it grows out, you're going to have the branches that are closer and closer together. So it's a lot more difficult. I think personally, of all the coral that I've ever had, and of all the coral that I've ever fragged, the single most demonic, hardest thing to frag that I completely sold my call on the elf because I refused to have it in my tank any longer is my Duncan. I hate fragging my Duncan. Whenever someone messages me saying they want 4 heads or 7 heads of this, I know I'm in for like the worst time of my life because of the fact that it grows so like grow so close, so dense. They grow so dense together.
Yeah, it does grow very dense.
It's awful because it's like such a thick, dense coral, right? Like every other coral is spongy, even micros are like the bandsaw will cut through like butter, but it's so tedious cutting it through the Duncan coral just because of how freaking dense it is.
Yeah, because all the heads are very closely sort of related. The flesh band on the Duncans is very long.
The flesh band is the entire thing. The entire thing is flesh band. It's awful. It's awful. I hate it.
It's flesh band with the ceramic bone underneath. Like that's an inch thick minimum.
Basically,
so good luck cutting through that.
Anti-fragger. It's the anti-fragging coral.
And it grows pretty fast. So
oh my god,
it's a great bellwether coral, though. I do like Duncans early on because they'll close up and they'll let you know when your tank's doing something a little bit weird. But yeah, definitely among the Euphilia for fragging, it is the fastest growing and my least favorite to frag.
I think it's very pretty. I love Duncan. I
Yeah.
love my Duncan colony. The white with the green. It's not a very common color combo scene. And it was very, very pretty. But it was just so awful. And it takes up so much space and it grows so fast that I kind of had to get rid of it because it was just not becoming worth keeping. And I'd already cut it down. Like there's been 2 or 3 points in the last 2 years where I will cut the entire colony down to like a 5-head or like a 7-head piece. And within the span of a few months, boom, you're like not over 100 heads again, right? So
Some people have that problem with frog spawn. Once it gets established, frog spawn really takes off in some
it's
cases.
nonstop, yeah, nonstop. So when you visited my house, the one that was growing in the front left was like that, where it was like just kind of growing on mass. Now, my torches are like that too. My dragon soul will grow like that. The Grim Reaper, the New York Knaves will grow like that, where they're growing pretty fast. So I've got to constantly kind of cut the base of the colony down so that it's just a few heads or a few branches growing outwards because the whole thing's growing too wide and too outwards.
So you probably should have fragged your coral before it became a problem. So if only past you could have heard this podcast episode, we might have saved you. That's sad.
Might have saved you. Past me needs to listen to this.
Unlucky.
Yeah.
Time traveling
Then,
podcast.
Yeah.
Then you've got the easier things, right? Like the LPS, soft scissors, easiest ones there are. LPS are a little more difficult. But I think the fine line between them, where you finally get to have fun with bone cutters, are SPS. Mouth polyp stony coral. And this includes your acros, your montes, your anacropora, your digis, which are also just montes, birds' nests, pocky, stylos, all the little thick branchy coral that make up a reef. That a lot of people aren't interested in the beginning, but then when they get the bite, and soon they want to leave it.
The hunger.
The hunger. And these are I think these are some of the easiest ones to grow, if not to grow, but these are these ones to frag, if not fragging and propagating. Like the way I mean that's like fragging being the part where you cut it, and then propagating being the part where you glue it down or you put it in a new place.
Yeah, they're definitely among the easier to glue up.
Yeah, because they have that nice fern skeleton at the bottom where you can take a dab of glue on the plug and then stick the little branch that you just cut into the dab of glue, and you just kind of hold it in place or you do whatever your technique is. These are as simple as what I like to do with these are a mistake I feel like a lot of people make when it comes to SPS is they'll take the bone cutters and they'll put it to the coral and they'll squeeze as hard as they can, expecting the bone cutter to cut the coral, right? Which is what I talked about earlier when it's basically just kind of thumping the coral, you're putting so much pressure until you cut through the coral or until the coral just kind of shoots out. What I like to do with it is I'll squeeze it and I'll firmly pinch the coral and I'll twist. I'll give one good flick of the wrist. And when you twist it, that kind of branch that you're pinching with the bone cutters will kind of break off. And that's how I frag my SPS. Definitely works a lot more when you have SPS that are encrusted or growing nice spaces. Yeah. Because if you're doing this to a freshly glued acro colony, you're going to rip out the entire acro colony.
Yeah, acros have that going for them where you need to wait for them to get really encrusted before you start applying force. Otherwise, you can knock the whole thing off. And some people, this is why I don't recommend they glue them down with big globs of reef epoxy. Some people will create big globs of reef epoxy that sort of raft the acropora just in it. They'll just mush it on the rock. And then it breaks off when you try to apply force or frag it later. Because it doesn't encrust as well over the epoxy. It will eventually encrust over the epoxy, but not nearly as well as it will over, ceramic discs or rock or
I think these were one of my influences for the reason that I don't like dealing with coral or fragging coral until they're colonies is because I want to deal with acros that haven't encrusted onto the rock properly and having those break off while I try to frag them while they're not ready to be fragged. That's my way of knowing whether the echo's cut me up or chop me to pieces when it's ready or not.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. But you get better at it as you get practiced. It is kind of weird.
I guess special mention to types of corals that will sort of always be encrusted, like Cephestria. Those, if you're going to do something propagation-y wise with them, you might want to go with the method with a thin skeleton or thin rock for them to go on. Some corals are
Islands, yeah.
always encrusting, and those are really a trick. A lot of the professionals and some of the more aggressive encrusting corals will just have it grow over an egg crate rack, and then they will cut the egg crate rack up and glue that to the frag plugs, and then they'll sell you the encrusted frag plug once it sort of spreads out and heals a little.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to do it. That just takes so long to do, though.
Yeah, and you kind of have to have this ugly system. It's got to be done fairly
It's for a while, yeah. What I like to do with them, and like, yeah, the encrusting corals, the ones that are like leptos, hypnophora, acanthostrophes, meteor showers, hephaestorians, there we go. Even chalices to a certain extent, because there will be a point where they're just encrusting over. Some Montes, like the reverse Superman Monte, the Sunset Monte, are just encrusters where their main goal will be to just cover rock, right? And it's not the kind of thing where it's like a thin layer of a Zoa-like material. They're deeply encrusted into that rock. Like you can have a hard time removing it from that rock, which is why whenever it's original placement for these, I consider just islands or small pieces of rubble on the sand bed where it's a lot easier to frag it down in size whenever I need to. All right, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's, like I said, special mention and attention to the things that will only encrust or will mostly encrust. Like some corals will branch, but only under different flow patterns, or but definitely once you get a system down for a coral, it can work out. Some people like to glue their larger colonies to a large rock that can then be removed, so you can work on it outside of the tank. But that's more of an aquascaping topic than, I guess, a fragging topic.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do with my torches, though, actually. Because I don't like removing, because I use a bandsaw with my torches, I don't like, and with the hammers, I don't like having to glue the tiny little stem back to the rock. So the entire thing will be glued onto a piece of rubble, and that rubble will then be glued onto the rock. So I just remove the rubble, and because I have all that surface area underneath the rubble, there's more space for me to add glue and for the glue to hold. And if it was like one little point, which was from the part that I took out, trying to be connected back to the rock.
Sure. I mean, but once you've cut the frag, then obviously, I think we've started talking a little bit about this with leathers and iodine.
Treatment
And sort of aftercare of the frag, right?
Yeah, like what do you do with it after you cut it? Because again, you're now taking healthy coral and you're delivering this big gaping wound onto the side of wherever, right? Whether it's a torch or a hammer or whatever, you're like providing him with this source of infection. My go-to is I will put all of the corals that I frag, I'll have them ready to go. And then immediately after they're cut, they go into this little mixture of Restore, Brightwell Codex Restore, and iodine. And that helps prevent infection. And I felt like after I started doing this, I've had better luck with the coral not
Restore?
Restore and iodine.
Isn't that like an amino acid?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, food.
It's food for bacteria, though, too, right?
Yeah, but then you have iodine. The coral opening up. Like the tissue will start coming out faster.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're not necessarily going to introduce a lot of bacteria in your dip. Right?
Whatever's free flowing in the water.
There's not really enough time for, I mean, even under super duper ideal conditions, bacteria will only replicate every 20 minutes. And while that's, somewhat terrifying in a long-term situation, if you have ideal growing conditions for like an E. coli bacteria, one can turn into a colony that outweighs an aircraft carrier in like 24 hours, right? But when you're talking about dip timelines, one bacteria maybe becomes two. So the iodine is still definitely going to sort of push out the, you're going to get that's a little more hydrostatic, I think, than actually bacterial killing. I need to look it up. I haven't checked. But the disinfectant will kind of go into effect, but the coral will respond more positively to having food, right? So whereas you don't necessarily want to give it solid food, because just like, when you've had a surgery, you don't want to eat a big hearty steak dinner, you might feel a little queasy. but having ice cream or pudding, it hits the spot, right?
I love iodine flavored pudding after my surgeries. It really nourishes me.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this goes into like energy management of the coral, like how the coral manages energy, which is on like a whole biological deep dive that I would love to go into, but it will be the next hour of talking. Because coral need to manage energy, and whenever they eat, they're both consuming, but whenever they digest, they're using a lot more energy than they are, consuming, which means it's like a net loss. But the downside is, or the upside is growth. But you want that all to happen after your coral is securely back in the tank and plugged up and all that, not when it's sitting inside of your, little bin and iodine and restore. So a little bit of food, the restore, I think, gives it the food reaction. So it'll start opening up a lot better and responding a lot more positive. But I wouldn't feed it until it's like a day or two later and it's already in the tank.
Yeah, it's already probably exchanging a lot of water because of the stressful situations it's in. So it'll absorb some of the aminos, some of the nutrition from the water, but not too much. So once you have conditioned your frags with restore and iodine, you have to eventually put them back in the tank. Like Ep said, if you're fragging soft corals or anything that engages in chemical warfare, you want to have that tank ready with a fresh batch of carbon, ideally a water change that day or like the next day, just to keep things flowing. And you have to be really deliberate about where you put the frag, how much light it's getting, how much flow it's getting, because again, it is a stressed frag and it's also a wounded frag. So if you put in too much light or too much flow, you can have some issues.
And I try to be consistent with what I'm cutting. Like if I'm bandsaw and I'm cutting coral, right? Like if I'm fragging, I'll do all SPS set in a row at once, and I'll have them all fried up and then glued up, and then I'll empty out the water, right? Get some new water, like scrub it out in RODI, get some new water, and then in the new water, I'll do all the torches that I'm cutting. And then once I'm done with the torches, they're all glued up, I'll empty it, get some new water, or empty it, scrub it, get some new water, and then I'll do the hammers and so forth. Like I try to be consistent, mainly because of the fact that one, I don't want tentacles from torches and or affecting hammers, or tentacles from hammers affecting SPS and so forth. And I don't want the toxins to kind of mix with one another. Because again, every single coral, when you frag it or cut it, it's going to put out, as long as like the piece of tissue is cut, it's going to put out a slime coat. I don't have this issue as much with torches or euphilia, where I'm cutting beneath where the flesh band is, because there's no flesh that's being damaged. But acros are all a level of a layer of flesh. Chalices are all layer of flesh. Most euphilia don't have that nice firm base layer. But most SPS, most LPS, most softies do. They do have all that flesh. So that's why I don't like to like mix it all together when I'm fragging. I'll do one, then I'll do the next batch, and the next batch, so you don't have all those toxins mixing with one another. Because that's where they'll mostly be released, right? If you frag a leather coral, a bunch of leather coral, it's going to mostly release the toxins into the base or the bin that you're going to put them into after you cut them immediately. So once it's from there, you're going to want to put it into your tank. And that's where you run a little bit of carbon. But to mitigate the amount of toxins that you have in there, you're going to want to, separate it and have it sit a little bit before.
And you'll literally see the water get goopified while your frags are sitting in that iodine solution. Some weird primordial shit happens to those frags into that water.
Really crazy. And you'll smell it too.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone that's been in the hobby for more than a few years knows the smell on site of frags.
On site of the smell, yeah, totally.
The Senia. You know the smell of Senia. Everyone knows the smell of Senia.
Wait, I don't think I know the smell of Xenia.
I'm sure you do.
It's probably because I've killed so many of them. I can no longer smell it.
You will smell it.
You'll know it. You'll smell it.
You would know that it was aquarium. You would know for sure.
I mean, if you guys say so, I've never smelt it.
Oh, when you
guess I never dealt it. Makes you think.
Yeah. No, anyway.
So definitely lower light, lower flow once you've dipped it, sort of healing up. I don't think we actually talked about gluing too much. I like to pre-soak my frag plugs, the ceramic discs. I'll grab just a cup of the water and I'll pre-soak the frag discs before I glue anything to them. because it really helps with the cyanoacrylic bond. At least I find. If you
And you
just
get
go with a dry frag disc, it doesn't really stick immediately. Then you got to hold it for a little bit longer, and it's just a little bit more processing. So
because the
once,
cyanoacrylate glue reaction is triggered by
By
water
water.
or by
What I like to
oxygen.
do. What I like to do is I'll put it on the dry disc. I'll put the coral on while it's dry, and then I'll dip the whole thing in water.
Yeah.
And then the cyanoacrylate will kind of harden as is. And because the frag disc is a little porous, the liquid cyanoacrylate will kind of harden the mix of like part of it in the frag disc and the rest of it on the frag.
Definitely a great tip for gluing is use the gel cyanoacrylate. Don't buy the typical crazy glue. Get the gel stuff. Any gel stuff will do. Like you can
Make sure
go
you use,
to you can go to a Dollar General. You can pay for the more expensive Reef branded stuff. I like to go to either somewhere that sells them in small tubes because they'll get sort of dirty or messed up, or they'll get some moisture in them and then the nozzle will get all clogged up. So I like to go down to my trusty old Dollar General because it's literally across the street, and they'll sell me like a 10 pack of like tiny, tiny, tiny little cyanoacrylic gel tubes for pretty cheap. But you can also buy them in bulk from Amazon. But gel CA glue, and again, I like to pre-soak my frag plugs. Banana likes to put it on dry and then dunk the whole thing underwater while holding it. But this is kind of a case of where the bigger the glob is, better the job to a point. You don't want the frags falling off, but you also don't want to like bury them in glue.
You also note that when you put the cyanoacrylate on your frag plug and you stick it in the water, you're going to have a layer of the cyanoacrylate kind of floating on the surface of the tank. And that might make your skin racked up a little bit. Or, if you have your arm going into the water, that floating glue might stick to your arm, and then you've got glue in your arm. I've had it happen. I have hairyish arms. I've had it happen so many times. It's awful. It's dry. It encrusts horribly. It's so annoying.
You might also have tangs or like curious wrasses picking at the new frag plug. They might get a bit of glue on their mouth.
Yeah. And you want to be careful about the kind of stuff that you keep in there because I've seen tangs that have, or fish that have had super glue in their mouth that, there's not much you can do after that.
I mean, well, you can't really do much, but you also shouldn't worry too much because it does fall off.
And then what I had one time was I had a blind Nestle tank that would eat everything. It was gorgeous. It was nice and large, super old fish. It was eating everything. My gloves were getting kind of tattered and torn up because, too much rock handling. I did nails and all this stuff.
I remember this.
Yeah. So I had pieces of the glove kind of fall out and the tank was eating them. And I didn't know about this until later, but this mass appeared on the side of my tank. And like eventually the tank just kind of died and that mass burst through the side of the side of the tank. And so when we pulled out, it was little rolled up pieces of the glove that the tank had eaten that had pierced it.
That's sad.
It was really sad. It was it had like nice long streamers and everything. And it was a blonde nazo. Like those are hard enough to get eating as is. But to get one that was like that big and like that healthy was
eating too well, I guess.
Yeah, honestly. It ate like a pig, but it literally ate everything. Just couldn't digest like one.
So yeah, don't leave shards of your broken rubber gloves in your tank, I guess. I guess we have to say that because people are like banana.
Well, I mean, it happens, it's just one of those things that as a beginner you might not think of, right? Although I wasn't a beginner when that happened, but like there's a lot of things that as a beginner you don't think about when you're trying to frag, right? And a few pitfalls that you might fall into. One, for example, is like trying to frag too many coral at once. When you start coral cutting, it gets exciting and you get a little excited about it. And then you have all of these corals that one you're trying to frag, you just don't have the space for. You didn't account for the fact that, well, you can't put all of these SPS next to all of these torches, next to all of these hammers. One thing's going to win the other. You can't put these SPS next to the Zoas. Or no, you can't put them next to the Gandhis. Surprise, one's going to win.
Yeah, definitely creating space around the frag plug is something that you learn as a beginner.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mainly because everything in a reef wants to kill everything else. Even if not everything's going to win. Obviously, torches win against hammers, hammers win against SPS, SPS win against other SPS, right? But everything is designed to kind of be the singular growing thing that outcompetes everything else or outstings everything else or dies trying. And they are not afraid of that trying.
Good for them.
Another issue that, at the beginning, I think about is having water ready to go. Like when I said that I had different little basins where I would empty it every time between fragging, that's all water that's being removed from the tank, right? And because I have a big enough tank, it's not much of an issue if I'm removing like 1 gallon at a time, even though I'd like to have water ready to go. It's always recommended that you have salt water ready to replace the water that you're going to take out whenever you frag. Because one way or another, you're going to lose water when you frag.
Yeah, it is absolutely worthwhile spending the extra $1 or $2 for a nice set of reefing bowls for this. I used like buckets, I used bowls from the kitchen, but a good set of like cooking bowls that are just sort of used for reefing. I like some that have little rubber grips. I mean, they cost a little more. People make fun of me. But it's so nice to have. Like, this is my bowl that I've put dipping chemicals in, and then you can sort of just refresh that as a dip, and then you have this
Yeah.
is the bowl that I'm working in to frag stuff. So having a couple of good reefing bowls where you can sort of I just remembered I just thought about how that sounded. But having a good set of bowls that you can use to set up a workflow for your fragging process, it can be very helpful.
And everyone has their preferred like hardware that they use. I use organizational trays from like Daiso or like a Japanese dollar store or like a normal dollar store or like a Staples. They're transparent. They hold about a half gallon and you can just set them up in a row. It's really easy.
I use OXO, the OXO ones. It's funny because when I got those, my dad looked at me like I was throwing money away. Like, he looked at me, he was like, "Why are you buying those? We can just use bits from the kitchen,
expensive, dude.
We can steal Tupperware from your mom." And she was so tired of us taking like Tupperware and using it for the tank. One time we took a like really nice thing mixer of hers that she had a bowl, and we used it to mix reefing cement. And she has not lived it down since then. Her reaction when she came downstairs and she saw us mixing cement on the bowl that she was looking for to cook with was insane. She almost had to shut down the tank on the spot. But I bought them. He looked at me like why would you buy this? To this day, they are his favorite bowls. Those things have been through so much crap. They've got scratches. They've got glue on them. They've had so much abuse go through them, and they're still going strong. I mean,
if you have a big tank, a good bowl can't be understated. Like, if you want to pull something out and look at it, if you want to look for pests, if you want to set up a frag workflow, I do agree with Banana on this one. A good set of OXO bowls.
Measuring cup also, because if you have a bowl and a measuring cup, you can figure out exactly what the volume of the bowl is, or the tray. And of course, you can mix stuff really easily if you have a measuring cup. And
it's really,
you don't have to steal the one from the kitchen.
It is definitely worth the extra $1 not to have to steal one from the kitchen. I do want to kind of double down on that, because you want to put it back, or you want to make sure that it's clean, but you are using soap often to clean these things.
Yeah.
And then the soap gets absorbed by the plastic, and then you have the distressed coral in the bowl, and there's soap leaching out of the plastic, and it's stripping out the mucus layer, and the coral's getting even worse. And it is absolutely worthwhile. These are not cheap corals, just from an economic standpoint.
It's
better care for the corals, just from like a humane treatment standpoint. It is absolutely worth it to go out and buy yourself $10 worth of bowls and measuring cups that you just use for your reef.
Exactly. And again, like they were a little pricey. They weren't even that pricey. They were like $15 each, right?
Man, come on.
Yeah, they're like $10 to $15 each.
I got Daiso, they're $2. You're getting ripped off.
I got 2 of the 5-gallon ones. No, or I think 5-quart ones. And I got one of like the smaller 1-quart ones. And again, like he'll use those almost every other day. Like they're so durable. I don't see us having to replace one anytime soon.
I use them to feed
Just-
because I've got such a big tank. I
You
will throw in a bunch of
frozen mice or something.
frozen. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do the exact same thing. Just a crap load of frozen mice into the 1 quart ones and just have it all melt. And then, we'll feed from there with a pipette whenever we need to feed the fish. It's just so versatile and so useful to have. And it's one of those things that you don't really like, because most of the equipment, it's whatever. You can kind of get this or that or this or that. But having decent bowls, and I don't just mean the brand that we got, having decent, reliable, dedicated bowls to work with in your hobby and this it's just way worth it.
Yeah.
I struggled for a long time with 5-gallon buckets, longer than I care to admit. But sometime in the I guess 2010s, I switched to bowls, and I will never go back.
No,
And if you're really hell bent on getting your tools from a hardware store, there are like 2-gallon paint buckets you can get. Not the ones with paint in them, the ones that you put paint and mix other stuff in. Just don't carry around
listen
the
to
5
Billy.
gallon.
Get bowls.
What?
Don't listen to Billy. Get bowls.
Bold, but you don't know the
I went-
volume. I don't like that.
The
I went-
5-quart mixing bowl is $15. Really.
I went from the big buckets to the little buckets trying to fight this fight.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you, man, it is better. You are right. The small buckets are better, but you got to have a big tank to really make that worthwhile. And even with a big tank, the bowls, I'm almost shilling for these bowls right now. But I love my bowls. I love.
Don't you
my
knock
bowls.
them over? I would knock them over immediately.
No, they have
Yes,
a nice rubbery flat bottom. So unless you're really, really, really bad, decent. It's 5 quarts.
Yeah.
And it's 5 quarts. It's like basically a gallon, right? And whenever you want to dip something, like your dip instruction will tell you like 1 quart per gallon. 1 cup per gallon.
Oh, there's a 3-quart one. That's basically a liter. Oh, but it's sold out. Okay.
I put a marker. I'll take a marker and I will mark where a known amount of volume is on my common reefing gear. So like I measure my salt for my mixing station with the 3-gallon bucket that Billy's trying to sell.
Yeah.
And I've got a marker on the outside of it. Then I'll fill it up. So I mean, definitely marking. And that's the other nice thing about having reef dedicated stuff, right? Like you don't have to go in there and be like, these are my mixing bowls. And you have all these black, like magic marker lines on the outside. People are like, what is wrong with this guy? Nope. My reefing bowls.
Ooh, some other good fragging equipment that you might want to add to your repertoire. There's 2 of them. One is mushroom boxes, which are just like 3D printed little cages that you can put rocks into and drop a bunch of either soft coral frags or little mushrooms into, and they're relatively low flow, so you can really easily attach mushrooms to rubble that way. There's also these acrylic boxes that hang on the side of your tank and have like a good amount of ventilation to them. You can use those either to put anemones.
Fish isolation boxes.
Yeah. Just don't buy the expensive ones. There's really cheap ones. And you can put pretty much anything in there, especially new frags that you're trying to heal. It's really helpful if you're trying to figure out how to not stress out the frags, because you can just kind of move it around the tank, see what kind of flow and light kind of locks in the corals that you're trying to frag. Those are 2 really nice tools to have. Oh, and tweezers for when your frags fall off the plugs or when your plugs fall off the rack. So you can go in and pick stuff up.
A nice pair of and this isn't just fragging, like a nice pair of like 24-inch tongs are just great.
Plastic.
Yeah, they do go a long way, tongs.
They go a long
Plastic
way.
tongs. Don't get the stainless steel ones. That the expensive aquaculture or not aquascaping ones for freshwater. Don't use those. They'll rust up immediately.
You can get ones that have been Plastidips.
Yeah,
I like them. There was a company that went and did Plastidip on those big metal tongs, and they came in really cool colors. But every time, it's kind of like an Etsy shop. A lot of people will like buy them, and they'll buy them in bulk for $5, and they'll go through all this work, and then they'll sell them for $6, and then they won't realize that like their time is actually worth something, right? And so you have to really catch at like a Reefapalooza or another coral show. Like you have to catch somebody selling a good set of Plastidip tongs and then buy them, and they'll last you for a couple of years. But I really like them. But for sure, people get really crafty, and then they go out of business a lot. So finding them can be very hard.
you'll
Max Spec
know where they
does.
are at the Reef show because they'll be like in fluorescent paint or made of fluorescent plastic, and
Yeah.
they'll be glowing like a beacon from across the room.
Everything is, yeah. I mean, there was a whole hype for like stainless steel and like corrugated metal and like all these super fancy materials. I don't think that's really necessary. Even if you want to use like the regular kind of stuff, just rinse it out in RODI water, dry it out. It'll last you for a long, long time after that. Most of this stuff goes bad because you'll leave it sitting there, or like you'll get lazy, you'll finish fragging, you'll leave it in the bin, you'll let it sit in the bin for X amount of time, and then you're dealing with rusty tools. And then you're putting yourself at risk because, tetanus. Or you're putting your coil at risk because you're fragging them with, unsafe tools or
Ooh,
stuff that
that's an important note, though. You need to clean up your fragging equipment after you've used them because corals leave a residue on the blade or on the bowl or on whatever. It's either the stress hormone or like they leave their nematocysts. But for some reason, if you use like uncleaned tools to frag another coral after fragging something, even like a couple days after, that second coral will have a lower success like survival rate. And I think it's because it's leaving something on the tools that you're using as a residue.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, cooking or whatever even won't destroy some of those things. So vinegar or a little bit of bleach to wash them off can be very helpful. Like
And you can drink a
zoanthids,
little bit afterwards. Delicious.
zoanthids especially with palotoxin, bleach will destroy it, but almost nothing else will.
Wow.
So in some cases, it's worth cleaning your equipment. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it's safe to say, don't use equipment that you use in the kitchen or for anything else for this. Right? Have dedicated sets of equipment for your hobby.
Agreed. All right. So I think we've talked pretty much as any three humans can talk about fragging. Do you guys want to talk about the fish of the week?
Yeah. So this fish of the week is one that really had his heart on for some reason. Not
heart on? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Enunciate for the microphone, please.
Oh my God. Whoops. This is something that Billy really wanted to do. The Niger triggerfish is one of the most demonic fish you'll keep.
This really goes cool for almost any triggerfish. There are many triggerfish are demonic, but the some of them more than others.
Yeah, the Niger is one of the most frequently seen ones. That is one of the less expensive ones. That is also one of the most painful to deal with afterwards. But yeah, the Odonus Niger, I wouldn't recommend it for anything less than like, I don't even recommend. What's the proper taxes for these guys?
I would do 200.
200? 150 to 200 gallons minimum.
It gets to the size of the bigger tangs and it swims a whole lot more. And they're aggressive.
So the reason why this fish is cheap is because it will swim up to investigate and or bite the diver, even at small sizes. They're very curious. And when the only tool you have to manipulate your environment is, your teeth, you tend to use your teeth on everything, right?
And they have teeth. Like they're triggers are some of the few fish and puffers, I think, where you'll actively see fish once the fish gets big enough. And I just have like these deep red-looking fangs. It's
terrifying.
Oh my God, it is terrifying. But yeah, like Chris said, they're easy to catch because they come to harass divers, and you'll frequently find them for like $70 US, at least in America. I don't know how they would be in the other parts of the world.
No, I mean I see them down in the 30s and 40s even.
Especially the tiny ones that come in.
The small ones, but they grow up to be a full foot. Like they get really big.
They get really big.
And
the problem is that most of them come in as small. It's like you'll see most of them come in like 4, maybe 3 inches.
Yeah.
And they're cute fish. They're really cute fish. And it's hard to find a fish.
They're very blue. They're very blue.
There you go. It's hard to find a fish that's genuinely blue. Like a solid blue color. And these guys have that blue
and they have a good outline, right? So they got the dark blue and the light blue and they pop. And, if you get one that has like a little bit of variation, they'll have some maybe a yellow or orange, a little bit in the cheeks. Like they're very colorful fish. You see them swimming around in the tank at the pet shop. You're like, wow, this fish has personality. Then you take it home and it eats everything in your tank, including you.
If you have a scape, this thing will say no more. This will rearrange your scape. This will redefine what a cleanup crew is to you. Say goodbye to snails. Say goodbye to crabs. Say goodbye to shrimp. say goodbye to smaller fish. These guys get big and they get mean and they get nasty, but there is a beauty to them. They have
for predator tank. For a predator tank, they might not be a bad choice. Like
they are not a bad choice, and they're great. And but for a beginner tank, you go to the store with your 90-gallon tank. You see these guys, please don't buy one. You're gonna be tempted to. Your LFS guy is gonna tell you that it's a 50-gallon fish. It's peaceful. Oh, this person's had triggers. No, they're fine. No, this person will not have fun with triggers. You will not have a good time with this fish. Unless you're trying to set up a predator tank, and at which point you will have fun. But just be ready to feed these guys inverts and whatever.
They're very not reef safe. That's true.
They're not.
Oh yeah, all those carefully, delicately, intricately glued frags that you just made after this episode, the trigger will just knock them all over.
It will not care. It will
crunch them up into little bits in front of you just to make you suffer. But then they'll look really cute and they kind of act like little water puppy dogs. So
that's one of the things about this whole family. Pufferfish, triggerfish. I do love their personalities.
They have beautiful personality. Yeah.
One of my first fish was a pufferfish, but he also had sort of some triggerfish buddies. And he came with a 90-gallon that I bought. It was my first saltwater tank. And this turkey, what is this? I'm sorry. This porcupine puffer
turkey puffer.
was tiny, and he came and he swam around. He was just a little puppy dog, and I named him Yoda, and he eventually just got enormous.
Oh,
but
man.
yeah, no, this whole family is very great personality.
I think the ugliest fish I've ever seen was a dog-nosed puffer that was quarantining with somebody. A dog-faced puffer. But when I was quarantining it, I absolutely fell in love with it. It was the most fun fish, genuinely fun fish I've ever had. It was just such personality. It was so much fun.
They're ugly but fun, just like banana.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I'm fun.
Just ugly.
Yeah, just ugly. You got double daily on the fun.
No, even with freshwater, like the pufferfish, the brackish tanks, the freshwater tanks, the
figure eights and all that.
Yeah, the MBO, the Moo or whatever's.
Mabu puffer.
Yeah. They tend to grow, and this is the other thing with like triggers too. Like their teeth will continue growing a bit, like if they don't crunch on some hard stuff, right?
Yeah, that's why you see them going for inverts. Things with shells. I mean, they'll take on full-on urchins in the wild. I think some of the most aggressive fish out there. Like, I know the Titan trigger, for example, is one of the most dreaded diving fish ever. Because it's almost on sight with them. The moment that a Titan triggerfish sees you when you're diving is the moment you turn around and you swim the other direction and pray that it hasn't seen you.
I mean, so that goes for any triggerfish, right? Like, so the Titan triggerfish is huge, and that's terrible because they are also very aggressive, but like breeding and stuff. But like any of the triggerfish, clown triggerfish, what the humu, all the triggerfish tend to be, there's a few exceptions, like people will keep some triggerfish for eating aptasia. There are a few more peaceful triggerfish, but they certainly wake up and choose violence a lot.
And they're good at it. They're really good at violence.
They are.
That's so two like social media facts about triggers. The Huma Huma puffer is a meme. If you look up, no, Huma Huma trigger, sorry. That's the meme of that fish that just looks weird. It's hard to describe. You just kind of have to look it up yourself. And then the Titan triggerfish, you'll see countless videos of scuba divers and fishermen and tourists being attacked viciously by a 2-foot-long triggerfish.
Yeah, no, I mean,
that species usually.
That is another one of the things, like even with pufferfish, that you kind of have to be aware of, is that they do have great personalities and they are curious, but the only thing they have to interact with their environment is their teeth. And pufferfish, triggerfish, they do bite. So you got to be careful with them in your tank.
Yeah. And
they're just trying to hug you, but their hugs are very painful because they use their teeth. So it still counts as a bite.
Exactly. And the biggest dangers of Niger are the size and the price, because those are the two most misleading things that you'll see. The size of the fish, right? Which is, again, Like you see them like 2 to 3 inches big, and then you'll see them at like $30 to $50 US dollars. So you think it's a relatively damsel-like fish until it isn't. And then your problem is store won't take it back, right? You're going to want to sell it and get rid of it. No one else wants it because either they've already dealt with it or they know to stay away from it. And so the one that ends up taking it is someone else that just doesn't know any better. And then you're stuck.
And the cycle of grief continues.
Yeah.
Cycle of grief.
And triggerfish are right up there with like panther groupers, a fish I just really wish I could keep, but I just don't.
They're so cute. The aquacultured ones that are basically like tiny little paddlefish.
Mm-hmm.
I think groupers in general, groupers are like some of the prettiest fish when they're babies. But when they get big, they're just so...
Have you guys seen bumblebee groupers?
They're so cute.
One of my LFS has a saltwater acclimated one because they can do either if you do it right. It's like 3 feet long, freaking huge.
Massive, yeah. And then, every now and then you'll see the Neptune come in, the Neptune grouper, which again, it's a very nice orange striped with white fish. But again, it costs around $600. Very, very cute and pretty when it's small. Just absolutely demonic and diabolical when it's large. And groupers grow fast. They grow very, very fast. In the span of a year, you're looking at like a full-on fish. And it's not done growing, right? So, just be careful when you buy groupers. Be careful when you buy triggers. Don't buy the Niger trigger unless it's something that you want or you've been waiting or you've been wanting for a while. And you know for a fact that your tank is ready. You are ready. Your wallet is ready because, again, these are predatory fish. You're going to need a very specific diet unless you want to replace it very, very soon. Yeah.
So that's our fish of the week. And a lot of subsequent warnings about the fish of the week.
We've introduced you a fish, and I'm trying not to keep it. Beautiful fish. If you got a system for it, go for it. Just, be ready to know that a lot of people, more often than not, do not have the system for it. Any opinions, Chris? Thoughts, comments?
Concerns, comments, complaints, criticisms, colloquialisms, or commentary?
The trigger I like is the clown trigger, but that has similar issues with aggression and size.
It's a little bit slower swimming, which is nice.
Oh, yeah, it has those giant clown shoes on. Those can't be very aerodynamic.
Yeah. They are. I do like clown triggers quite a lot, but they're a little bit slower, I feel like, because their fins are smaller.
Well, that clowns can't swim, so we're okay.
They're not very funny.
Yeah, bad at their job. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, anyways, any questions from the audience?
I didn't see any roll in.
No.
Most of our listeners have done a lot of fragging.
Yeah, they're busy fragging while we're talking. Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, so that's been our podcast on, reefing and or fragging specifically. So know what you have when you frag to, for the health of the corals and reduce coral warfare, but also for trading, swapping, or selling. Make sure you have great tools and use your safety gear appropriately. Make sure to provide enough after quick care with dips, placement, make sure there's low flow, a little less light than normal. We recommend you get aquarium specific gear to keep you and your family safe from the social acceptance factor of the hobby. And just, be careful to go slow the first few times and learn from your own experience.
Yeah. Yep. Or just get a bunch of green star polyp because you can tear that stuff up with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Rubber band it to something and it'll be fine.
And if you follow these simple tips, it'll be easy reefing. Easy reefing. Easy.
Okay, I say E, you say Z, and I say reefing.
Okay. Z.
Reefing. Thank you for listening to another episode of Slice of the Reef,
your number one podcast for all things fishy, with your hosts, Giancarlo and Billy. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else that podcasts are held. That way, you'll never miss an episode. If you want to be a part of our podcast, join us on discord.xyz/Slice of the Reef, where we'll be recording in front of a live audience. We also give you a moment at the end of every episode for a live Q&A session, and we're very interactive with our fans, so we'd love for you to join. You can also check out our website for articles, guides, calculators, and information on our upcoming episodes at sliceofthereef.org. Hope to see you guys soon.
Farewell and easy reefing.